Hello everyone, this is the Nightmare Man, and in this episode we're doing another randomized D&D character. Specifically, this episode we're doing a chaotic neutral, half-orc, blade singer wizard, and of course I rolled female for this one as well. Rira has never had an easy life. She was born from an orc father and a human mother. Her mother was disgraced, personally at least, to have her affair with an orc proven through flesh. It was because of this disgracement that her mother left Rira on the streets of Nalros City. Nalros being a city of mostly humans who aren't very fond of the different races, specifically orcs for them, much to the misery of young Rira. Rira was really only able to survive due to a mixture of half-orc instincts and the kindness of the other homeless citizens of the city. For quite some time her diet was mostly rats and dirty water. One thing that can be seen as probably the start of her eventful life was she was taught how to write and read Common by an elderly human veteran who used to defend the city but had long since become homeless and destitute due to his old age and lack of, well, caring for the city anymore. The truly fortunate or unfortunate part, which is a matter of perspective really, is that what he used to teach her was his old spell book. It was from these teachings that Rira unknowingly gained the knowledge and spells of a veteran blade singer wizard. While she was one day in the streets, as usual, using an old, fairly rotted stick as a practice weapon, and she was noticed by one of the noblewomen of the city by the name of Laurel. Laurel was a fairly high-ranking noble in the city who kept her position by lending her personal soldiers to the city's military. Not one to look a gift horse in the mouth or ignore a valuable asset waiting to be grabbed, she took Rira in and not only got her a real sword, but food and actual training. Despite now having the means to eat, Rira unfortunately never allowed herself to eat what she probably should have, as she always had the subconscious fear that she would get used to food only to have it ripped away. As she grew up under Laurel's care, Laurel at first treated her as a valued treasure and an object, since blade singers were rather rare in the kingdom, and a half-orc one would be seen as both easy to quote-unquote train into obedience, but also be a valuable fighter. Of course, towards the end of it, Laurel saw her much more as a daughter. Though she never intended to, it just sort of happened. So she took great care for Rira. But when Rira was 10, just a few days after her birthday, the leader of the city, Jackson Volrir, showed up at the manor, waiting for his newest batch of personal soldiers to be delivered. But he decided he finally wanted to take Rira for his armies. As a blade singer was invaluable, as previously mentioned. Laurel denied this, using the excuse of Rira being far too young to be a proper soldier, which would have turned most hearts. But Jackson insisted that a young blade singer half-orc could be molded to his wishes, and beaten to submission. This news set Laurel on edge, but she said she would get ready to deliver Rira to the castle by the end of the day. Of course, she would never. Instead, what she did was pack Rira enough tools and supplies to make it on her own, and told her to run from the city so she wouldn't be forced to be a soldier for a war that she didn't have any part in. Rira was, of course, heartbroken and sad at first, but she was also extremely touched that someone cared for her enough to help her out of this situation. After all, this woman had originally talked to her as if she was an object, but now she was basically a mother figure. And the fact that she had to abandon Laurel to save her own life was not easy on Rira. But she was told to go. She wasn't allowed to stay, so she ran. It was only a few days before she ran out of rations and needed to try hunting. It was hard at first, but eventually she got a squirrel. It wasn't until the 6th day that she ran into actual trouble, when Rira was ambushed by adventurers who were native to Nalros and thus thought anything resembling an orc was evil and needed to be put down. She was putting up her best effort, but this was the first time she'd actually entered real combat, not just practiced against training dummies, so it was a little harder for her. She would have perished had it not been for the group of actual orc warriors that rode in on horseback and, well, to put it lightly, piked the adventurers with spears. The orcs took pity on Rira as at least resembling one of their own and brought her back to their camp and healed her wounds. At first she was worried that they'd also try to kill her or something worse when she woke up, but the shamans and leaders assured her that she would be protected here as one of the orcs, even if she was only a half-orc. The leader of the orcs, Greskill Blood, was a kind orc who frankly just wanted to keep his people safe, and while it seems like blasphemy to most orcs, he truly didn't want everyone fighting. It was over the next 5 years that Rira spent time with the orcs, helping them with their small fights, and she got to experience actual battle. It was through this that she actually got to hone her skills and learn how to truly fight. She also learned how to treat injuries from the shamans, though her magical abilities weren't particularly suited to magical healing, but she learned how to dress a wound and bandage it. It was during this time that she got more than a few war tattoos while she was gaining victories. If anyone were to ever sit down with her, she would greatly enjoy explaining the meaning behind each one, specifically the one under her eye, which she earned from killing a basilisk. But that's a story for another time. It was around this 5-year mark that Nalros had been encroaching farther and farther, expanding their territory, and unfortunately this led to the orcs being in their way. Rira didn't think she could fight against the people of the city she grew up in, especially since she knew she'd be fighting soldiers that were, for lack of a better term, supplied by Laurel, and, well, quite frankly, there's a very good chance she would have trained with them and grew up with them. and she knew that killing them would not only make her own heart ache, but would also make things very difficult for Laurel. She thought that she may be forced to fight them as part of the Orc army, but Greskil Blood, the aforementioned leader, allowed her to leave before the first conflict. Rira hated the thought of abandoning someone else who helped her, so she offered to stay, almost pleaded to stay, but the Orcs just gave her a horse and supplies, insisting that it would be a waste if someone with her skill and such a kind heart died in the war, especially a war that was such needless violence. Rira couldn't stop herself from crying as she rode away. She hated that this was not even the first time she'd abandoned people for her own survival, and she vowed that one day she would help both of those people. So for the past 2 years, Rira has been traveling the world trying to find a way to get strong enough to not only end the war between Nolros and the Orcs, and possibly even get rid of Jackson Ulrich, but she also wants to reach Laurel again, and give her, albeit adoptive, mother the biggest hug she could. To this day, she still uses the sword that Laurel gave her, and the armor that she both was given and helped make from the Orcs. So that is Rira, the chaotic neutral bladesinger wizard half-orc female. And I'll finally say that she is currently 17 years old. She weighs around 110 pounds, which is way too low, but she also doesn't eat enough because of that whole thing about not wanting to get used to it. And she is only 5'10", and I'll say that she, while a few other backgrounds could fit with her backstory, being mostly in Laurel's care, for the first 5 or 6 years she was technically an urchin, so I gave her the urchin background. Sorry, hiccups background. But anyways, that was Rira, and this has been the Nightmare Man. I hope you all have a wonderful day.